The game that acted as one of the greatest inspirations for Halo is finally back. It's out of cryo after, God, 25 years at this point? We need to talk about this. So, yesterday, Bungie announced that they are officially reviving Marathon, which was their game before Halo. The trilogy of Marathon, Marathon 2 Durandal, and Marathon Infinity released in the mid to late 90s and ended up being one of the biggest inspirations for Halo. So much so, right, that people thought that Halo Combat Evolved was Marathon 4. Marathon's DNA runs through the very veins of Halo still to this day. The two are intrinsically linked. So many core elements of Halo and its universe and its artistic design come from Marathon. Things like the MA series of assault rifles, the Marathon class frigates like the Pillar of Autumn, the Reclaimer symbol, manufacturers like Traxxas and Miseria Armories, Mjolnir, and even the Spanker, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. In so many ways, Halo and Marathon feel like distant cousins, and story and lore is again one of them. You look at almost any piece of Halo lore, whether it's minor or major, and I guarantee you that it has its roots in some way in Marathon's universe. Now, truth be told, I am nowhere near as clued up on Marathon's lore and universe as I want to be. I'm currently in the archives absolutely turbo binging Marathon lore, so I can get clued up and hopefully in the near future bring you guys some Marathon lore content. It's something that I'd love to make because in many areas it's really similar to Halo because so many of the ideas that Bungie used in Marathon's story, they then reused and fleshed out more in Halo, but then in other areas there's very clear similarities in the content, but they go in very different ways. So I think it would be really interesting, as obviously a Halo lore channel partly, to cover that kind of stuff. And also I've been in talks a little bit with My Name is Bife about possibly doing a collab with Marathon lore videos soon, which could be very cool. But based on my very rough understanding of the Marathon universe as it stands right now, the long and short of the overall story is that it's a game about preventing the implosion of the universe and ensuring the survival of humanity, who are threatened by a coalition of alien slavers, rampant AIs, and the universe itself. And you play as a security soldier decked out in Mjolnir Mark IV armor, so I'm sure you can see the massive similarities to Halo there already. Of course, there is so much more to the universe than that, and I'm not going to butcher any of the lore by trying to talk about it yet without actually fully understanding it, but just know that there are a lot of similarities to Halo. The overall, overarching story actually kind of reminds me of the relationship between offensive bias and mendicant bias with the ways that the AIs interact, notably Tychon and Durandal, but I'll get into that when I know more about the lore. So, what is Bungie's Marathon reboot? Well, it's a cross-platform game on Xbox Series X and Series S, PC and PS5, and it's an extraction shooter like Escape from Tarkov. Now, don't jump the gun here and leave any super opinionated comments yet. Try and watch the video all the way through and save those kind of comments till the end, because I've seen quite a few people reacting quite negatively to it being an extraction shooter as opposed to like a single-player narrative-driven game, and I understand those complaints, and to a degree, I do agree with them, but at the same time, just watch the video. I think I can explain it. I have a lot of hours in Tarkov, right? I play an unhealthy amount of Tarkov, and I feel like I know what extraction shooters can do really well, quite well, and I think that Marathon will actually fit this genre a lot better than people are giving it credit for. So let's start talking about what I'm excited for with this game by talking about just that, why I think that an extraction shooter is actually kind of good for Marathon. Well, the way that Marathon told its story was that it was mostly told through environmental storytelling, but mostly terminals. Fun fact, actually, the terminals in Halo 3 were themed very similarly to how Marathon themed its terminals. There were no voice protagonists or anything like that. No, it was nothing like the way that Halo told its stories. It was a lot more subtle and hidden in the environment. If any of you guys know, for example, the early versions of the Call of Duty Zombie story, like World at War, Black Ops 1, and some Black Ops 2 elements of the storytelling, they were done quite similar to how Marathon told its story. So imagine a game that is driven almost entirely by environmental storytelling, by bits of storytelling embedded within the world itself, not overtly told to you, and also conveyed through big text blogs and also terminals. That's the kind of storytelling that Marathon thrived with. It was why it was so unique, and I think it's one of the reasons why an extraction shooter will work so well, because that's kind of the exact way at least Tarkov tells its story. Most of it's baked into the maps and through things that traders and stuff tell you once you do tasks for them and quests, so it's not told to you in like a typical video game fashion. And by the looks of it as well, Bungie are committed to telling a really Marathon style story. There's an ARG going on right now that is like I Love Bees level of just insane. Like, I can't even begin to pass through any of the information in this ARG. There's so many different weird websites, like corrupted strings of text, weird like accounts that you can log into and get data from. This ARG is insane, and if this is even slightly indicative of the way that they're going to tell the story in Marathon, with it being an extraction shooter, then I think they're gonna do it right, or at least I hope they do. Another reason that I'm excited to see Marathon as an extraction shooter is because, frankly, I absolutely love that genre of game, and I think it's kind of underrated right now. We're seeing a lot of AAA developers come into it, but so far, like Modern Warfare 2's DMZ mode and that Battlefield 1 weren't that great. I'm hoping Bungie can do it justice and blow the genre up more than like Tarkov and Darker have even managed to. So, believe it or not, there are actually some OG, and I mean very, very OG Halo developers working on this Marathon reboot. Steve Cotton, who was an artist who worked on Halo 2 and Halo 3, is the game's creative director, and Christopher Barrett, one of the grizzled ancients who worked on Halo since literally Combat Evolved, is the game director. So the game is definitely in good and very knowledgeable hands. And another reason I'm excited is, to be honest with you, this is very superficial, right? But it's Marathon. I mean, seeing this logo on screen in a new capacity was one of the most surreal things I've ever experienced, because to me, obviously Marathon wasn't intended to be this, but to me, because my jumping on point into like Bungie culture was Halo, Marathon was always this kind of like weird like precursor series to Halo for me. Like I've never gone back and experienced it as its own entity, which I'm absolutely going to do now, but seeing it return like this as its own title is it's surreal. It really is surreal. That said, I definitely have some concerns going into this game. Main one being the aesthetic. I don't think the aesthetic is bad by any means. I actually really like it. It looks quite Ghost in the Shell, neon cyberpunk inspired, which I am getting quite tired of cyberpunk aesthetics nowadays. They're starting to get really overdone, but this doesn't look like a traditional generic cyberpunk aesthetic. It looks quite new, and I actually didn't realize that one of the artists that's working on the game literally worked on Ghost in the Shell, which is probably why it looks quite similar to that. But it really doesn't invoke Marathon to me. Marathon was always this kind of grungy and grimy and desolate looking game where the world seemed like almost like just dirty and industrial, and this looks like the complete opposite. Very clean, very kind of precise, and very vibrant and colourful, which isn't what Marathon looked like before. Granted, this is likely a reboot, or a reboot or some kind of a different entry in the series that's not meant to piggyback off the exact aesthetics of Marathon 1, 2, and Infinity, but it just didn't invoke Marathon to me. I kind of guessed it was Marathon at the start of the trailer, but it wasn't until the Bungie logo where I was like, all right, this is Marathon. Whereas I feel like if they'd used the actual like really grungy, grimy Marathon aesthetic from the 90s, I would have instantly known that it was Marathon. That said though, Christopher Barrett shared some quite early concepts for some of the designs for the game on Twitter last night, and these do look very Marathon. My only hope, or one of my hopes, is that they get Craig Mullins to do some art for it, or that Craig Mullins has already done some concept art for it, because his art pieces and concept arts for the original Marathon are some of the most like Bungie looking Bungie things ever, and I feel like making a Marathon game without stuff like that as concepts and inspiration would be a big miss. Now, another one of my concerns is that with an extraction shooter, they absolutely can do Marathon style storytelling, but the issue isn't whether they can or not, it's whether they will or not, because the game obviously is PvPvE, it is technically multiplayer, so inherently story is going to take a bit more of a backseat compared to if the game was a single player narrative game. And one of my big fears is that they don't really like grab the story element of Marathon by the balls and really like go for it and have a real great story for the game, because they focus too much on the PvE multiplayer element of it. That said, seeing the compiler in the trailer, which by the way, seeing a compiler in modern graphics, what the hell? Does give me hope that we'll see the other enemy alien races as well, and with them some lore and story for them. And the way that they're marketing this so far with the ARG that includes the UEG, MEDA, and other stuff gives me hope that they will flesh out the wider universe in the game. But right now, I wouldn't say that's a given, because the game is multiplayer and not single player. But to be honest, my biggest fear are microtransactions. Now, I don't play Destiny. Frankly, I'm not particularly interested in Destiny. I've tried over the years to get into it, and it's never managed to hook me long term. But I know that Destiny has definitely had its teething problems with microtransactions, and God forbid the entire industry has at this point. I mean, you think of any beloved game from that era, and if it's still going, it's played with microtransactions. It just is. That's the way the industry is nowadays. And a lot of modern microtransactions that you see in games nowadays don't jive well with extraction shooters. People will make the argument of being like, oh, well, if they're cosmetic only, then it's okay. Like, no. Cosmetic only microtransactions will not work in an extraction shooter where when you get into combat, you need to instantly be able to tell what gear somebody's wearing, whether you can shoot at their head or their chest, whether you need to leg them and shoot the unarmored limbs or aim specifically at the armor or at the face or something like that. These games are hugely about min-maxing and about making very, very important decisions in a split second. And if you have cosmetic only microtransactions that come in and dilute the visual appearance of enemy players, then it's gonna mess with that quite a lot. And then obviously there's also the example of like, well, pay to win stuff, which I doubt they do because it's very taboo nowadays. Activision are trying it again with Modern Warfare 2, and it's not being received well, thank God, but there is also that fear as well. In my opinion, the best way to go with this game would be to have paid DLC, but I don't know. Bungie do that with Destiny, so there's a chance, but my greatest fear, to be honest with you, is cosmetic-only microtransactions. And then there's the last thing, right? This, as Halo fans, right, this is not the Bungie that we remember. I know a lot of people know this, but there's also a lot of people that don't, because the amount of people I still hear saying like, oh, just give Halo back to Bungie. It's not the same Bungie. This is not the Halo 1, 2, 3 ODST Reach Bungie anymore. This is a very different Bungie. I mean, inherently it's different because so many of the OG developers from those days have left, but also like philosophically and the way they design games, it's just different now. The industry is different and so are they. So this is not the Halo Bungie. There are definitely people that worked on Halos, or on Bungie's Halos, working on this game, but this is not the like Bungie Golden Era, Halo era Bungie, right? It's a different Bungie, and with that come different expectations for how the game's gonna go. Needless to say, I hear a lot of things about Destiny despite not playing it, a lot of good stuff and a lot of bad stuff, and Marathon will undoubtedly get a bit of both, so just don't go into this game expecting it to be I've seen some people saying like, oh, this is just Bungie making their own version of Halo again. It's not gonna be like that. It's just go in with the expectations that this is not Bungie's second go at Halo or anything like that, and just know that it's not the Halo Bungie anymore. All that said though, I am pretty damn excited for this game, and I'm absolutely going to be covering it on the channel. I mean, with all of Marathon's links and references to Halo, and also the fact that it's Marathon and an extraction shooter, like, I have to cover it, dude. I have to cover this on the channel. It feels just too perfect. So leave your thoughts down below on Marathon so far, and also the idea of me covering it. If you'd like to see that, let me know down below in the comments, and if you haven't done so yet, subscribe for more Halo, and this feels insane to say, but Marathon content as well. Jesus Christ, that feels weird. I'm going to round this one out here. Thank you all to my amazing patrons for the continued support as per usual, and I'll catch you all in the next one.